Support for this podcast comes from Blackline and U.S. Bank.
CFO Thought Leader, Episode 31.
Trapped in a backward-looking finance function? Join Jack Sweeney and today's most inspiring CFO thought leaders and advance to the front lines of strategic decision-making.
Accounting and finance teams are facing a significant obstacle these days. Traditional financial close processes just weren't built for the modern business economy. The conventional record-to-report model leaves no time for analysis, and the increased risk of error can damage the quality, accuracy, and timeliness of results. A new approach called continuous accounting, pioneered by our sponsor, Blackline, can be thought of as real-time R2R, a blueprint for a more modern accounting organization. Instead of reactive operations, organizations and teams work proactively. It's a world where the CFO can walk into any meeting and provide real-time, up-to-date, up-to-the-minute financial intelligence. For more information, check out the Continuous Accounting Resource Center on the CFO Thought Leader website or visit blackline.com to learn more about their full line of finance automation solutions.
Hello and welcome to CFO Thought Leader. Our special guest today is Professor Ben Sopranzetti of Rutgers Business School. Professor Sopranzetti, an internationally renowned expert in financial strategy, who also happens to be an expert on the art and science of negotiation. Ben, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Now, I was thrilled to have you accept our invite to be our guest. It may have been 2 or 3 years ago when I was fortunate enough to hear one of your lectures on negotiation. You were speaking to a CFO audience at the time, and I recall how really engaged they were. When it comes to finance leadership, it's clear negotiation offers just the kind of complementary skills that will lead others to seek out the CFO's counsel. In fact, it's arguably hard to identify a better skill set to complement the CFO's core finance problem-solving acumen. So there are many places we can begin, Ben, but given our limited time, I thought we could explore some of the more accepted laws of negotiation. For instance, most negotiators say never make the first offer. True or false?
Oh, this is definitely false. The first offer in a negotiation is called an anchor. And what the anchor does is it sets the tone of a negotiation. People tend to migrate down for an anchor. Let me give you an example. Imagine if you were on vacation in Thailand and you weren't feeling well. You got sick and you were sick for a couple of days and you went to the pharmacy and you don't read Thai and they don't speak English. And they had only 2 medicines on the shelf that could help you. Both of them had 10 pills in it. The first medicine cost 75 cents. The second medicine cost $12.50. Which one are you going to buy? And I bet most people would buy the one that cost $12.50 because they perceived it to be of higher quality, when actually it's a ruse and they're exactly the same medicine made by the same manufacturer, just packaged to mislead people. So people are very strongly influenced by price. And if you anchor aggressively, you tend to end up with a higher outcome. Now, that being said, one needs to know the right time to anchor. And the right time to anchor or to make an opening bid in a negotiation is when you have superior information. When you know what something is worth, really know what something is worth, or when you really know what someone else is willing to pay for it, then you can anchor very aggressively. But when you're not sure what something's worth, then if you open a negotiation, you run the risk of making a really exceptionally bad deal for yourself. So the rule is, if you know what it's worth, anchor. If you don't know what it's worth, wait. And when you're sitting at the negotiating table, look around that table and ask yourself, who's the sucker? Because if you don't know who the sucker is at that table, guess what, Jack? It's you.
So we also always hear this, the more you discuss an anchor, the stronger it becomes. How is that exactly?
Yeah, that's true. You never want to give your counterparty a chance to defend or justify an anchor. That anchor is going to act like a beacon and keep pulling you back to it. So if someone anchors in a way that you think is too aggressive, my advice is to ignore the anchor, justify why you think your anchor should be what it is. So you don't want to give them the chance to support their opening bid. You want to come back and say, wow, judging from that number, I think we're a little bit far apart. We did our analysis, and for these reasons, I actually think a better opening price is bang, and whatever you think it is. So your goal is not to react, very negatively, like, how can you ask that? Well, how do you justify that? Are you kidding? How'd you get that number? This is absolutely not what you want to do. Instead, you want to neutralize it and say, wow, from that number, I think we're looking at things in very, very different ways. From our perspective, and then for these reasons, we think that a better place to start would be whatever is a more appropriate number for you.
I remember you emphasizing the importance of sort of understanding the zone of possible agreement as you enter a negotiation. There should be some thought given to where this zone, the limitations of it, the borders of it. Is that should it be used in negotiation, the zone of possible agreement?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a mistake that many negotiators make is that they forget that negotiations are bilateral. That means it involves two people, and that two people have to get what they need, not necessarily what they want. You don't need to get what you want in order to have a successful negotiation. You have to get what you need. And if what you need and what they need is not in an overlapping area, there's no way for the deal to get done. So again, a principal mistake in negotiations is that people don't understand the zone because they're focused on what they want and what they need, and they're not thinking about that counterparty. The successful negotiators are the ones that are also ensuring that the other person on the table is getting what they need.
We often hear silence is a great tactic in negotiations. How should silence be used?
Silence is a very effective tool in any kind of communication. But silence has a strong cross-cultural. There are strong cultural differences regarding silence. In the U.S., I would say even in the West, silence is perceived as disapproval. So when something says something you don't like, people tend to respond with silence. And it makes people very, very, very uncomfortable. Whereas, say in China, for example, silence is actually thoughtful contemplation. So when you're negotiating in China, when somebody responds to one of your demands in silence, what they're doing is thinking about it. Very often, and for example, next time you go to buy a car, when the car salesman gives you an opening bid of say $30,000, and you think it's too high, rather than saying it's too high, just look at him and say absolutely nothing for about 20 seconds and watch what happens. I guarantee you that he or she is going to absolutely lower that opening bid, and you haven't done anything but be silent.
The law or the key, make the moderate request immediately after the extreme one. Why is this?
Okay, well, this is actually a technique. This is called slam the door in the face technique. And it's a technique that you use when you need to get something. You absolutely have to have it, but you have a very strong feeling that the other person is going to say no. Let me give you an example. So here, what I really want from you. So Jack, what I really want you to do, I really want you to take two juvenile delinquents that I know that they're not bad kids. They just had some trouble. I want you to take them to the zoo, the Philadelphia Zoo, this Saturday. That's all I want. Just take them to the Philadelphia Zoo this Saturday. Now, you might be inclined to do that, or you might not be inclined to do that. Many people would say no. In fact, most people would say, no, I'm not going to do that this weekend. Take some delinquent to the zoo. That's not what I want to do. I want to spend the time. I want to spend the time with my family. That's not what I want to do. Right? So I'm anticipating that you're going to say no. So I'm not going to make that request to you. Instead, what I'm going to say is this. Jack, this podcast that you're running is really fantastic. It's a phenomenal reputation, and you have a great reputation. And I think that you would be a great role model for young delinquent boys. So I'd like to ask you, would you be willing to be a big brother to donate two weekends a month of your time for 2 years for counseling young boys? Now, I know and you're a great guy, but you're probably going to say no to this. Okay, you're probably strongly going to say, absolutely not. Ben, listen, I just can't do that. Well, I'm going to immediately moderate. And I'm going to say, all right, Jack, well, listen, I get it. I know you can't do that, but would you at least be willing to take him to the zoo this weekend? And when I do that, it makes it very difficult to say no to me, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Right. So the key here is to moderate. The key here is to moderate an extreme request with one that seems more reasonable. A great example is imagine if you or if your spouse or loved one had to negotiate that they had to work home 1 day a week. They really need 1 day a week that they can work home, but they know that the boss is going to say absolutely not. All right. So you walk in and you want the job. You need the job, but you got to have the day a week from home. So what you would do in negotiate, this is a great fit. I think I'm a great fit for the position. I'd love to work for this firm. I said, but I need to be able to work remotely 2 days a week. And of course, the person's going to say, well, no, I can't let you work home remotely 2 days a week. Or you can say, well, would it be possible at least every now and then if I could work from home 1 day a week? And it seems like you're making a concession. You're really not. What you wanted was to work 1 day a week. But the door in the face technique can be very, very effective in getting something that you absolutely need when you think your boss is not going to flex.
In the past, you had talked about how utility is convex in gains, but concave in losses. In other words, large gains do not add much more to the overall enjoyment relative to smaller gains. Do I have this right, or how does this work exactly?
Here's what it means, is that when you make money, you're happier. And of course, the more money you make, the happier you are. But the relationship between happiness and the amount of money you have is not linear. For example, imagine if you walk down the street and you find $1,000. But so think about how happy you were in the morning and think about how happy you are now. I just found $1,000. This is amazing. I'm having a great day. So you're sky high. You feel fantastic. So you go to work, you come out, go out for lunch, and while you're out for lunch, you look under your car, and there's another $1,000. You just found a second $1,000. So let's think about how happy you are now. You're certainly happier than you were when you found the first 100, of course. But are you twice as happy? And almost no one would say, no, Ben, you're not twice as happy. You're definitely happier, but there's decreasing returns to decreasing sensitivity to increases in wealth in our happiness. All right, so let's say that we're up $2,000. What a great day. You're calling your wife, you're calling your husband. Honey, I just found $2,000. What an amazing day. So you're going home and you've got to take the subway home and it's crowded. Okay, people are banging into you. You get off the subway and you notice that your wallet or your purse feels a little light. And you look inside and you found somebody stole $1,000. Now think about how unhappy you are when that person steals $1,000. Are you as happy as you were this morning when you found $1,000? Because you're still $1,000 better off than you were when you woke up, right? But no, there's no way you're as happy as that. You're pretty unhappy because you're focusing on that loss. All right, well, are you as happy as you were when you woke up in the morning? No. Why not? Because you're extremely unhappy because you lost money. So people or utility is extremely sensitive to losses. People are extraordinarily sensitive and pay more attention to losses than they do gains. But the reason why utility is convex in losses is that once people reach a certain point of loss, they're numb to further loss. And a great example is, imagine you're outside in the rain. In the beginning, you're starting to get wet. Think about all the crazy things that you do or that you've seen people do to avoid getting wet. But then, have you ever reached a certain point where you've gotten wet enough from the rain that you just don't care anymore? It doesn't matter if I get any more wet because I'm wet enough. And prospect theory describes this type of function regarding gains and losses. So people are very sensitive to losses, but they're far less sensitive to big losses than they are to relatively small ones. And people are sensitive to gains, but they're far less sensitive to very, very big gains than they are to normal size or smaller gains. So what it means, to sum things up, is that if you want to reward people, or you want to give news to your boss, you want to take good news and you want to break it up into pieces. You don't want to give somebody good news all at once, because they're not going to appreciate it as much as if you break the good news up into small packets, give it to them one at a time, let them process it and let them enjoy it. But when you have bad news, what you want to do is bundle all the bad news together and give it to them all in one shot. This is why we do big bath accounting charges. So when it comes to concessions that you make are gains for the other side. So you want to break your concessions up, concede one thing at a time. But when you're asking them for concessions, that's a loss for them. You're going to ask them to concede all in one shot.
Now, related to that, another law, early concessions are usually larger in size than later concessions?
This is actually kind of interesting. It's called the law of diminishing rate of concessions. And one needs to be very careful that you don't fall into a trap. So there's usually, and not, again, this isn't a law, I mean, it's a law, but there's usually a pattern of negotiations that looks like this. Is that the first can say you want to buy a car. So the car is listed at $45,000 and you want to pay $41,000 for the car. So you walk in and the salesperson says, okay, the car's $45,000. I can give it to you for $44,000. So they take $1,000 and you're like, no, that's just not enough. It's not enough. All right, let me see if I can do any better. All right, I can do it for $43,200. Now they've taken $800 off. Nah, it's still too much. $43,200 is too much. All right, I can do it for $42,800. Okay, a smaller move. And you're like, wow, it's still not enough. Look, I've got to check with my sales manager. Okay, I can do it for $42,600. Still not good enough. All right, let me get my sales manager here. Now it looks like you're cutting them down to the bone, right? That all the excess is gone. Sales manager comes back. Listen, my best price is $42,490. I can't do any better. That's my best price. So as you notice, over time, the concessions get smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's sending you a signal that you're getting closer to the reservation price. The thing is, in this case, they were tricking you because they actually would have been delighted to sell you the car for $41,500.
Ben, you're fond of using historical anecdotes to illustrate the art of negotiation. I recall one in particular that you used, and I was hoping you would share it with us now. It has to do with one of the Roosevelts campaigning for president in a photo that was used on a campaign brochure.
And so it's Franklin Roosevelt, who's in his third term, running for his third term in office, okay? So he's running for his third term in office, which was just unprecedented. And actually, it was Teddy Roosevelt, but it was unprecedented. And so they printed out all the brochures. And, back then they would take a train cross country and they made stops in the major cities. And these brochures would contain a lot of information. It had a picture of the candidate. It would state their position. Well, there was only one small problem. And that is that the campaign manager forgot to get the permission of the photographer who took the picture in order to use it. In other words, it was a clear copyright violation. And at the time, the law was that the pecuniary remuneration should have been $1 per photo. So the loss, we're looking at a $3 million loss, which is a lot of money now, which was an insane amount of money back then. So the campaign manager is faced with a conundrum. He either ponies up the $3 million or he needs to get another photograph. But the thing is, they can't delay because they're on the primary trail. So what does he do? I mean, all the balls are in the photographer's court right now. But what the campaign manager does is absolutely brilliant. He sends a letter to the photographer, and it says something like this. Again, I'm paraphrasing. It says something like this: soliciting photographs for presidential campaign brochure. Unprecedented opportunity for photographers to display their work. How much are you willing to pay for the right? How much are you willing to pay us to use your photograph? Please respond immediately. And the photographer responds, thank you very much, but I can only afford to pay $250. So here you take a situation where you're looking at a loss of $3 million and you turn it into a gain of $250. It's brilliant.
Ben, you mentioned when it comes to silence in negotiation, there are some cross-cultural disconnects. What are some others?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the culture of negotiation. For example, if you're negotiating here in America, we tend to negotiate the two decision makers will both be at the table together, and the decision makers will be negotiating. Now, there might be an agent there with them, but usually the decision maker is at the table. And if the decision maker is at the table, you have the ability to come to a consensus if one is possible. But for example, if you're negotiating with Japan, it's very, very often that you'll have a team of negotiators, and the decision maker will absolutely not be at the table. So it's a completely different vibe than what it would be here in the U.S. Also, and I'll use China, for example. I mean, sometimes, or very often in the U.S., the two people that are negotiating something will never meet before the actual negotiation. I mean, this would not be the case in a professional negotiation in China. I mean, the two people would meet beforehand. They probably have dinner. They discuss the soft issues. They start to get to know each other a little better, and they'd work out a lot of the details before they even got to the table. And the premise is that you tend to negotiate better with a friend than you would with an enemy.
Thought Leader listeners, don't go anywhere. We have more of our interview after these words from our sponsor. U.S. Bank has an alternative for spelling impossible. It's I'm possible. When you work with U.S. Bank, you gain more than a financial services provider. You gain a trusted partner who understands your challenges and helps you to see what's possible. U.S. Bank's expertise in helping clients manage cash flow, combined with its comprehensive payment solutions and outstanding customer service, make U.S. Bank a perfect strategic partner for your middle market business. U.S. Bank, the power of possible. Learn more at usbpayment.com/middle market.
One final question. I was curious where you find the best negotiators in an enterprise, and one would imagine I would immediately think members of the sales team who are, along the front lines, interacting with clients and negotiating deals. CFOs have not traditionally had enough practice at this. At least the back office accounting function is not where you get, negotiation skills. Where in the enterprise are the key negotiators? Where are these skills being garnered? Who gets them?
Anybody that has to close bilateral transactions. And it doesn't have to be sales. It can be HR. It can be purchasing. If you have a mergers and acquisitions group, it can be in the mergers and acquisitions group. But let me tell you, some of the most ferocious negotiators I've ever seen have been in the purchasing department. This is a discussion about negotiation, but really, on a broader scale, it's really about influencing other people to get what you need. Again, not just what you want, it's about influence other people, either outside of the organization or within the organization, to get what you need.
Ben Sopranzetti, thank you for being with us on CFO Thought Leaders.
Absolutely my pleasure, and thank you.
Subscribe to the CFO Thought Leader podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And don't forget, visit CFOThoughtLeader.com, where you'll find information about our latest webinars featuring our CFO Thought Leaders and produced in collaboration with our partner Blackline. Join us as our CFO guests answer your questions in real time about driving change in their organizations. CFO Thought Leader is produced by Middle Market Media.